Now let us begin at the place where most of us, in all honesty, begin, with the longing to find God. And now I must say a hard word that I hope you will hear as love. The very act of seeking God usually begins with a confession we do not even know we are making. The confession that God is not here. Seeking, as we commonly mean it, rests on the premise of absence. The heart cries, "Where are you?" And in that cry, we have already placed God at a distance. Do you see that? Now mark this well, because this is going to be a very, very important point in your life if you catch it. If God is infinite, there cannot be a place where God is not. If God is all presence, all life, all mind, all law, where would there be room for an opposite presence, a second space, an empty corner waiting to be filled? Infinity allows no vacancy. Therefore, the kingdom is not to be located later. It is not to be imported from somewhere else. It cannot be established by our reaching up or out. It can only be recognized where you already are. Don't ever misunderstand what I'm saying. I am not against the sincerity of your heart. I am correcting the premise of your thought. Your longing is not wrong. Your premise is wrong. Think of how this plays out. If I accept that God is absent, then everything I do becomes a project to remedy that absence. Every prayer turns into negotiation. Every practice becomes travel. Miles and miles of travel, undertaken in a universe that has no outside and no distance. Therefore, if you accept absence, you will spend your life trying to overcome an absence that never existed. You will weary yourself on a road that does not exist, toward a destination that is already here. Is that right? Do you see that? Now the mind says, yes, yes, but. And we will meet that but in its turn. For the moment, let us establish the foundation. God is. Not later, not elsewhere, not when you have climbed the right ladder of merit. God, as infinite presence, leaves no leftover geography for separation to stand in. So the shift is not from far to near, but from concept to recognition. Not acquisition, but awareness. We are not going to recruit God into our room. We are going to awaken to the fact that there has never been a room outside of God. Please do not hear this as a rebuke of devotion. It is devotion purified. It is love without the superstition of distance. The impulse that says, "I must find," is the soul's true hunger. But when the premise is corrected, that hunger rests in what is, rather than chases what is not. We do not set out to get God. We consent to God as the only presence here. We let seeking become seeing. And in that instant, striving begins to soften, and the first taste of peace, quiet, practical, unforced, comes forward as the evidence of recognition. Do you see that? All right, then let us carry that foundation forward one step. And I want you to listen with the inner ear, because this is the core revelation. If God is infinite, where would you put a second place? If God is omnipresence, where would you stand to be away from it? If all is God, where would there be room for what is not God? Now mark this well, because this is going to be very, very important if you catch it. There is not God and you. There is God expressed as you. There is not God and world. There is one presence appearing as all form. Do you see that? Let me make it tangible. There is not light and a lamp. A lamp without light is a dead shape. The lamp is light formed as a lamp's shining. You don't go to a lamp to get light from somewhere else. You plug into what already is. So with you, there is not God and you haggling across a counter. Your very existence is God's light, formed as your individual shining. Therefore, any attempt to reach out to an over there is an admission that you do not know you are already plugged into is. And that is the only problem. Now the triad begins to make sense. God as the only substance, the only life, the only mind, forming as all that truly is. God is present tense, not becoming, not traveling, not waiting. And I am the individualized appearing of that one. As is, am. As is an am. All that God is, I am, by expression, not by possession. Where God is, I am, by inclusion, not by invasion. Do you see the difference? Don't ever misunderstand what I'm saying. I am not elevating a human ego. I am identifying the one as the only I that is. Therefore, for God to be omnipresent, the kingdom cannot be a future attainment. It must be a present fact. What then delays our experience of it? Only a false sense, like a man standing in the sunshine with his eyes shut, complaining of darkness. The sun does not have to move, the eyelids must yield. Infinity does not have to arrive, the sense of distance must give way. And what is the practice? Recognition. Not fabrication, recognition. Now, the moment you accept this, you stop trying to travel to God and begin to recognize God. You stop making of prayer a ladder and make it a doorway. No, even that is too much. You realize there never was a wall. You sit still, not to summon a deity from afar, but to let the fact be a felt fact. God is the only presence, the only place, the only power. Here. Here as mind, here as life, here as law. And as you consent, just consent to that, striving loosens, breath eases, and guidance becomes practical because it is already at home in you. So hold this before you in the day. There is not an over there to find. There is the here of God to acknowledge. There is not a later kingdom to earn. There is the present kingdom to recognize. And recognition, steady, humble, disciplined, lets the light that is already shining shine as you. Is that right? Do you see that? Now we come to the place where the mind always rises up, and it will not be satisfied with easy answers. It says, but, and here comes that terrible, terrible word, but. Look at disease. Look at war. Look at injustice and disaster and grief. What of that? All right, I hear it. I have heard it in hospital rooms and in quiet houses where the night would not end. Don't ever misunderstand what I'm saying. We are not cold to the sting of experience. We are not playing word games over another's tears. We honor the human feeling of it. We honor it by refusing to lie about God in order to explain it. Now mark this well, because this is going to be a very, very important point in your life, if you catch it. The issue before us is not whether discord appears. It does. You can see it, hear it, count it, and it can seem to bruise you as you touch it. The issue is whether it has cause, whether it has law, whether it has substance, whether it carries divine authorization. That is the only issue in this work. If God is infinite, where would a second law be housed? If God is all presence, by what corridor would a rival presence enter? Do you see that? Take your eyes for a little walk with me. Stand at the railroad crossing and watch those tracks run out to meet each other at the horizon. They meet. You see them meet. They undeniably meet, until you lay your hand on the cold steel and find two rails far apart. Sail with your gaze to the end of the ocean, and you will swear there is a line, a hard boundary, a rim where water and sky fuse. There is your horizon, real enough to draw maps by, until you move and the line moves with you, and there is no edge to touch. Lift your head to the mountain and see the blue dome of the sky resting upon its shoulders. It rests there. It sits right on the granite, until you climb, and there is no place where sky and stone ever met. Do you see that? A picture can be vivid and still be false. So when pain shouts, when headlines scream, when a diagnosis parades its measurements, do not argue with your senses as if to become blind. No, recognize the category. Appearance, picture, suggestion, hypnotic outline without law. There is a world of difference between honoring the compassion that moves you and granting a second power the right to exist. The instant you award error a cause, you have forged its chain and locked it to your ankle. The instant you see it as a picture without law, you have refused it a courtroom in which to prosecute you. Therefore, keep the premise holy. One presence, one power, one law. Anything claiming to be another presence, another power, another law, is an appearance, sometimes loud, sometimes long, without divine authorization. The but is not proof of God's absence. It is proof that appearances can look convincing without being law or reality. Hold to that, not stubbornly, but faithfully, and you will find that the sting which seemed to have a sword was only shadow, and shadows cannot cut. Do you see that? Now let us take the next step and make this very exact. Because if you miss this by an inch, you will miss it by a mile. Error, discord of any name or costume, is not a thing. It is not a substance. It is not a power. It is not an entity. It is an appearance in consciousness, a suggestion, a hypnotic influence, a mental image projected upon the screen of sense. Do you see that? The rails do not actually meet. The horizon does not actually stand as a wall. The sky does not actually sit on the hill. The picture insists. The picture persuades. But the picture has no law behind it, no cause within God, no effect authorized by reality. Mark that well. No law, no cause, no effect. Now, why do so many of us fail right at the edge of this? Because the human impulse is to fight. The mind says, "This is terrible. I must oppose it. I must conquer it. I must push it out." And in that very motion, we give it status. We seal it with our acknowledgement. We enthrone it as a power to be wrestled. You cannot overcome illusion by agreeing it is real enough to fight. You do not take a sword to the horizon. You move, you see, you understand, and the horizon's claim dissolves. Is that right? Do you see that? Therefore, the practice is not aggression. It is recognition. When fear rises in your chest, when lack whispers in your ear, when a diagnosis rattles its papers before you, treat it as a claim presenting itself for recognition, not as a fact demanding reaction. Pause. Do not strike. Do not plead. Recognize category. Ah, this is a picture. Without law, without cause, without effect. And then bring your consciousness back to the holy premise: one presence, one power, one law. Not two. Never two. Now don't ever misunderstand. This is not indifference to suffering. It is the only way that suffering yields. If you wring your hands with it, you tie yourself into its knots. If you hate it, you harden it with the substance of your hate. If you fear it, you pump breath into its lungs. But if you discern it as suggestion, without law, without cause, without effect, you pull its plug. You refuse it the oxygen of belief. You deny it a courtroom in which to prosecute you. Make it practical. The thought comes, I am afraid of tomorrow. Stop right there. Do not argue with tomorrow. There is none to touch. Say within yourself, gently but with authority, this fear has no law, no cause, no effect. God is the only presence here, the only activity of mind. Or it says, there is not enough. Answer. This picture of lack has no law, no cause, no effect. Omnipresence is fullness present. Or it shouts, this body is failing. Answer, not to the body, but to the claim. This report has no law, no cause, no effect in God. Life is the only life here. Then be still. This is not incantation. This is recognition. Rest a moment in the fact, abide a moment in the presence, and watch as the compulsion to fight drains away. In that resting, because you have not granted a second power, the picture begins to thin, to fade, to release. Discord dissolves when it is recognized as appearance without law. Not by force, not by argument, but by the light that knows only itself. Do you see that? Now then, having seen that error is an appearance without law, let us face the next sacred step. Because if you leave it here, you will have a beautiful theory and the same old life. A true statement about God can sit proudly in your mind and change nothing at all. You can memorize, God is the only presence, and still pace the floor. You can recite, one power, one law, and still check your watch to see if relief has arrived. Mark this well, because this is going to be very, very important if you catch it. The kingdom is not an opinion you hold. It is a presence that holds you. Do you see that? What is the difference? Concept is you thinking about truth. Realization is truth thinking you. Concept is a sentence. Realization is a silence. Concept is an effort at reach. Realization is a cessation of reach. There comes a moment, usually so gentle that if you are waiting for fireworks you will miss it, when the inner turbulence softens without reason. The breath finds itself. The mind stops arguing a case for absence. There is a quiet is felt, not declared, and in that instant you know, and you cannot say how you know, that you are not alone and never were. Not an emotion, though it may sweeten the heart. Not a sight or a sound, though sometimes words will seem to form within. It is more like being met from within your own being, as if the center answered the circumference and said, I am here. Do you see that? Now don't ever misunderstand. This is not a phenomenon to chase. Chasing makes it run because chasing is seeking, and seeking assumes distance. The voice within, as we call it, is not a performance for your senses. It is the natural activity of presence when the mind is no longer bullying the room. Sometimes it speaks in words. More often it speaks as rightness, as a clear leaning, as a peace that removes alternatives without debate. And when you move in that rightness, it proves itself by the fruit of peace. My sheep hear my voice, not because they practiced clairaudience, but because they stopped shouting. Is that right? Do you see that? The sign of realization is not that conditions do acrobatics on your timetable, but that fear loses its throne before anything changes. You find yourself unhurried without trying to be brave. You notice that you are not begging. You open your hand without losing anything, because you recognize there is nothing outside the all to bring or to keep. In that recognition, the kingdom which was already within becomes evident as a presence felt, immediate, intimate, practical. Now here is the warning and the invitation. If you do not consent to live from that felt presence, the mind will steal back the jewel and stamp it into doctrine. You will be quoting yesterday's manna while today grows restless again. Therefore, when this awareness takes you, let it govern. Let it inform a next word, a next step, a next mercy. We are not collecting experiences, we are abiding in presence. And from that abiding will come our prayer as communion and our daily discipline of recognition, so that what is realized once is not lost to argument, but becomes the quiet habit of our day. Do you see that? The kingdom is not an idea you memorize. It is an awareness that takes you, and then, if you are faithful, keeps you. Now, having come this far, we must re-educate our understanding of prayer. Because if you carry old prayer into new light, you will lose both the light and the prayer. Mark this well, because this is going to be very, very important if you catch it. Petition assumes that God must do something, give something, come somewhere. It assumes a distance to be closed and a will to be persuaded. But if God is infinite presence, where would God come from? And to where would God arrive? If God is fullness, what is there to give that is not already constituted within God's isness? Don't ever misunderstand what I'm saying. This is not a criticism of your devotion. It is the correction of its premise. God is not withholding, and therefore God cannot be coaxed. God is not absent, and therefore God cannot be summoned. Do you see that? Therefore, prayer that is true under this light is not petition. It is communion. Communion means we rest in the fact of is. God is. Communion means consciousness yields to presence rather than tries to persuade presence. You do not take a megaphone to the sun to get more light. You consent to light by opening the shutters. So in prayer, we do not strain, we do not bargain, we do not present a case. We sit. We yield. We agree with what already is. Let me sit here. Let me be still. Let me abide in thy presence, not to get, but to know. Not to add, but to unveil. Not to move thee, but to be moved out of the lie of distance. Is that right? Do you see that? Here is the paradox, and I want you to carry it into the very center of your practice. You are not asking for the kingdom. You are consenting to it. Consent is the doorway of realization. Consent is the opening of the shutter. The light was already shining. Consent is the end of argument. Wisdom was already speaking. Consent is the end of self-will. Life was already living itself as you. You may use words, quiet, simple words, but the words are not levers, they are acknowledgments. Thy grace is my sufficiency. Thy presence is the place. Thy is, now. And then be still. Not inert, but still. not apathetic, but available. But what of need, the mind says? What of danger, of decision, of pain? All right, we are not escaping life. We are consenting to the only life there is, to live it through us. Communion does not remove you from responsibility. It rightly establishes you in it. Out of communion comes the word to be spoken, the road to be taken, the mercy to be extended. Out of communion comes the authority with which you will meet each claim as it arises, not as a panicked petitioner begging a second power to shift, but as a witness to one presence, one power, one law, here. In that order, action is no longer frantic, it is guided. Treatment is no longer a struggle, it is recognition. And the day ceases to be a hunt for help and becomes the quiet walking of a path already illumined. So let us make the exchange. Lay down petition and take up communion. Let me sit here. Let me be still. Let me abide in thy presence, not to get, but to know. Consent, and the kingdom that never left will become the felt government of your hour, your decision, your breath. Then, as the day unfolds, you will discover that prayer has not ended. It has widened, becoming the atmosphere in which you act, the poise with which you meet appearances, and the peace that goes before you as law. Do you see that? Now we must make this so practical that you cannot miss it. And I am going to speak with urgency, because without this, you will circle for years around a truth you never quite live. Set periods in your day. Yes, set them as you would keep an appointment with your own life. Morning, noon, and evening at the least, and if you are wise, you will add 2 more brief pauses. And the purpose of those periods is not improvement. Don't ever misunderstand what I'm saying. The purpose is recognition. Sit down for 3 minutes, for 5, and let the first word be God. Not God and, only God. God is, therefore I am in God. Where God is, I am. What God is, I am, by expression, not possession. Then be still. Not to get, but to know. Not to move God, but to cease moving away in thought. Do you see that? Now here is the reset method. Because life does not wait for monasteries. All through the day, the old habit will start. If only I could reach. If only I could get. If only later. Stop right there. Pause, even in the hallway, at the sink, between phone calls, and return to the fact. The kingdom is present. I need awareness, not distance traveled. One breath, one inward nod, one consent. If the mind starts bargaining for a feeling, gently withdraw the bid. The feeling is not the fact. The presence is the fact. Affirm, quietly. One presence, one power, one law, here. And then take your next step in the light of that recognition. Now mark this well, because this will save you 1,000 disappointments. Realization grows by repeated yielding. Not by straining, not by timing God, but by surrendering the premise of separateness again and again, until the mind's habit breaks. The human mind is a wanderer. Let it wander if it must, but you bring it home, 50 times a day if need be. Each return is not failure, it is practice. Each return polishes the lens. Each return weakens the hypnotic suggestion that there is a far-off God to find. Do you see that? The practice is not to get nearer to God. It is to stop departing in thought. Now I must confront the misuse, that turns this holy work into a new technique. If you sit down to recognize presence so that a bank account will rise or a symptom will fall, you have already slipped back into dual power. You have put a price on God and made of prayer a lever. That will not do in this way. Outcomes may follow, often beautifully, but they are fruit, not target, effect, not cause. Communion is the purpose. Abiding is the obedience. The moment you make of recognition a tool to acquire effects, you reintroduce the very absence you claimed to deny. Don't ever misunderstand. We bless the appearing of good, but we will not worship it. Therefore, accept your responsibility and go to work on this every single day of the week. Keep your appointments. Keep your pauses. Let the first word be God, the middle silence be God, and the closing consent be God. When the mind seeks, stop. When the heart frets, stop. When the day crowds, stop. And return to the fact. God is, therefore, I am in God. Persist, and the habit of restless striving will yield to a quiet assurance. Persist, and peace will begin to go before you as law. Persist, and you will discover that the kingdom you ceased to chase has been the very ground under your feet, governing the hour as guidance and the heart as rest. Is that right? Do you see that? Now we make this holy thing practical, and I want you to hear it as instruction you can take into your next breath. Mark this well, because it will save you months of circling. You never begin with the problem. You never begin with the person. You never begin with the symptom, the bill, the headline. The first word is God. Drop the picture and the story out of your thought and let the first word be God. Presence, law, life, intelligence, wholeness. Do you see that? So the treatment moves in a simple, exact order. First, begin with God's allness. Quietly, steadily, acknowledge God is. One presence, one power, one law. Not becoming, not arriving, is. If there is one infinity, there is not a second anything. As, is, am. God as the substance. God is the activity. I am the appearing of that one, by inclusion, not possession. Second, acknowledge God as the only law. Law is not a committee in the sky. Law is the mode of God's being. Therefore, what God is, law is. Life is the law of life. Love is the law of harmony. Mind is the law of intelligence. There is not a competing statute anywhere in omnipresence. Don't ever misunderstand what I'm saying. I'm not denying your senses. I'm denying them authority. Third, turn and face the claim as a claim. Name it, not dramatically, but exactly. This fear, this pain in the side, this bank notice, this quarrel at the office. Recognize category, an appearance, a suggestion, a picture on the screen of sense without law, without cause, without substance. Is that right? Do you see that? Fourth, deny it law, deny it cause, deny it effect. Speak within yourself with quiet authority. This hereditary sentence is a suggestion only. God is the only blood, the only life, the only lineage of being. This contagion is not a law. Omnipresence leaves no place for invasion. This accident, chance, mischance, has no ordinance in infinity. There is order only. This economy, boom and bust, is no law to God's household. Sufficiency is the law of omnipresence. This other person's will has no jurisdiction. There is only the will and wisdom of God expressing as all. You see what we are doing? We are stripping false law one by one, so there is nothing left to enforce the picture. Fifth, rest. This is the heart of treatment. After you have witnessed to one presence and emptied the claim of law, be still. Not inert, available. Let the peace take the seat. Let the pressure to fix subside. Let the realized truth hold you. In that resting, because you have not set up a second power to wrestle, the picture begins to lose compulsion. Now insist on specificity. Do not treat error in the abstract. Treat this particular fear until the sense of fear yields. Treat this report until the sting loses its throne. If another aspect of the same claim rises, meet that aspect specifically. 5 minutes, 3 times a day if you must, and again at midnight if the suggestion is noisy. Accept your responsibility and go to work on that case every single day of the week until the sense of separation yields. Don't time God. Persist in recognition. Make it vivid. A fever speaks. Do not argue with heat. Begin with God. One life, the only vitality here. Contagion has no law. Heredity has no law. Disorder has no law. Rest until the quiet says is, or a supervisor's temper threatens your peace. Do not enter a contest of wills. God is the only mind, the only will, the only government of this office. Another mind has no law over you. Rest until the inner poise governs your next word. Then act, not as a petitioner, but as one under authority. In this way, the kingdom becomes practical. We are not fighting shadows. We are witnessing light. We are not begging outcomes. We are abiding in law. And as you are faithful to this order, God first, God only, appearance recognized, false law denied, truth realized, you will find fear quieted, supply ordered, bodies at peace, and relationships harmonized without granting a second power the dignity of existence. Do you see that? Now we must take the knife to the root, because if you do not touch the root, you will prune branches forever and wonder why the tree keeps leafing out again. Mark this well, because this is going to be very, very important if you catch it. Seeking returns whenever the silent premise of I, me, mine is allowed to live unchallenged. The noble impulse to seek God, if it is born of that separate I, is the prodigal leaving the Father's house to find the Father, while clutching the deed to a private life. Do you see that? You know the allegory. In the beginning, the creation of God is finished, whole, very good. Then there appears in our scripture a second creation, not made by God, but framed in the human mind, a sense of being outside, knowing good and evil as two, and so a man called Adam, or a woman called Eve, or, let us be honest, a fellow called you or me, gets busy inventing a life to manage, supply to earn, health to protect, salvation to win. That is the fall. The fall is not a place, it is a premise, separateness. And from that premise springs a very religious, very earnest seeker who says, if only I could become spiritual, if only I could deserve the presence, if only I could achieve God. But all of that is the prodigal in a nicer suit. Do you see that? Don't ever misunderstand what I'm saying. I am not despising devotion. I am exposing the doer that counterfeits it. The separate I manufactures distance and then volunteers to bridge it. It sets up a God over there and then tries to travel, by fasting, by formulas, by merits, toward what infinity never placed apart. That I will even borrow the language of this work. I will use recognition. I will use meditation. I will get realization. And in that very breath, the liar is crowned again. The human I cannot reach God because there is not God and I. There is God expressed as I. As, is, am. Now mark the healing shift. Individuality is not a private possession to be improved. It is God's qualities individualized. There is not glass and a tumbler. There is glass formed as a tumbler. There is not God and you negotiating. There is God forming as your true identity. Therefore, identity is expression, not acquisition. Inclusion, not invasion. The prodigal does not earn his way home. He awakens to the fact he never left anything but awareness. When he came to himself, the scripture says, not when he bought a ticket, when he came to himself. Do you see that? Here is your practical test. The moment you feel you must strive to deserve presence, notice who is speaking. That sense of I, me, mine, is the imposter self. Do not wrestle it. That would give it law. Recognize category, a suggestion, a picture, an old hypnotic habit, without law, without cause, without effect. Then turn, gently but with authority, and consent. I am home in thee. Not will be, am. Sit down inside that. Let the breath find itself. Let the need to reach subside. Let the Father's ever-presence be the only fact here. All right then. This becomes part of your daily discipline. Along with meeting fear, lack, disease, and conflict as claims, meet the claimant, the I, me, mine, as the root claim. Expose it. Deny it law. Return to as, is, am. And you will discover that seeking falls of its own weight because the traveler evaporates. Guidance remains, devotion remains, practice remains. But now as the life of the Son in the Father's house, not as a beggar on a road that never existed. Is that right? Do you see that? The prodigal doesn't travel to God. He awakens to the Father's ever-presence, and that awakening is the end of the search. Now we come to living from the kingdom. And this is where the rubber meets the holy road. If realization remains an inward warmth but does not govern your steps, you will lose it to memory. The kingdom must become government, guidance, right where you choose, speak, sign your name, and meet your brother. How does guidance function under one presence? Quietly, impersonally, usually without drama. It comes as a simple rightness that removes alternatives without a debate team. It is an inward leaning toward peace, honesty, patience, a next word that carries no sting. It will not flatter your vanity with voices to impress your friends. More often, it will stop your tongue, open your hand, slow your step. Is that right? Do you see that? Don't ever misunderstand what I'm saying. We are not fishing for messages. We are consenting to presence. In the pause, 2 breaths at a doorway, 1 quiet moment before you answer the phone, you yield to the fact. 1 presence, 1 power, 1 law, here. Then you notice. The hurry drains. The need to prove yourself loosens. And what remains is plain enough to do. Make the call. Don't make the call. Say yes, but tell the truth. Say no, but without defense. Go back and apologize. Wait till morning. This is guidance. It carries the flavor of peace, and when you follow it, there is no aftertaste of strain. Ethics in this way is not a rule book taped to the forehead. It is substance recognized. When God is seen as the life of all, manipulation starves for want of a separate self defeated. Condemnation loses its fuel because there is no second life to sit in your courtroom. You cannot steal from your own household. You cannot defraud your own being. You cannot use pressure where only love is law. Honesty becomes natural, not heroic. Mercy becomes obvious, not costly. You discover that gentleness is not weakness. It is the strength of knowing there is no enemy in God. Now the street test. You meet a beggar, a cough, a quarrel at the crosswalk. Do not avert your gaze as if darkness were contagious. Pause. The first word is God. One presence here, including this one. Recognize the picture and strip it of false law. Lack has no statute in omnipresence. Disease has no ordinance in life. Conflict has no charter where love is law. Lift them in consciousness. See them, not as sufferers you must fix, but as included in the same one as you. Then, if there is an action, it will be given. A coin, a look that restores dignity, a word seasoned with grace, or silence that refuses to make a lie into a law. Do you see that? Guard yourself here. Recognition is not superiority. If you feel bigger, you are smaller. If you feel holier, you have wandered. Recognition is humility, yielding personal sense to divine presence. We are not better than our brother. We are beholding God as our brother's being. And in that beholding, something happens. Peace arrives ahead of you. Tempers cool. A door opens where a wall seemed to be. Sometimes, yes, the change is sudden. Pain vanishes. Supply appears. A hardened face softens like spring. Often it is quieter. The day arranges itself. The heart rests before the facts move. This is proof enough. Not noise, not spectacle, but the steady government of is. As we live this way, the kingdom ceases to be a phrase we admire and becomes the presence by which we walk, decide, forgive, and include. And that inclusion, seeing each one already within the one, becomes the law of our peace and the light of our next step. Is that right? Do you see that? Now we come to the simple, holy finish. And I want you to hear it without embroidery, because it must be lived, not admired. Mark this well, because this is going to be very, very important if you catch it. The end of seeking is not the end of God. It is the end of the belief in absence. Do you see that? When you lay down the chase, you are not closing a door on infinity. You are closing a door on the lie that infinity could be somewhere else. The sun does not shine more because you run toward it. It ceases to be blocked because you stop pulling the shade. Therefore, the sacred conclusion of this way is not motion. It is rest. Conscious, consenting, faithful rest in what is. Rest, 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 until the heart knows what the mind has repeated. The mind has said, one presence, one power, one law. Now let the heart taste it. Not once, again and again. Return and return. Sit in the ordinary chair of your ordinary room and abide without pressure. God is. I am in God. Say it once and then be quiet. And if the mind runs, bring it home. And if it runs again, bring it home again. Each return sands down the old habit of absence. Each pause is a little funeral for striving. Is that right? Do you see that? Don't ever misunderstand what I'm saying. You do not lose depth by stopping the chase. You gain depth because communion is deeper than pursuit. Pursuit stands outside what it wants. Communion stands inside what is. Pursuit times God. Communion yields to the timeless. Pursuit expects a sign. Communion abides in the signifier. Therefore, you will find as you rest in presence that richness grows, quietly, unadvertised. Insight becomes natural. Guidance becomes ordinary. Peace moves first, and events become followers rather than masters. All right, here is the final mandate you can carry in your pocket like breath. The moment you notice yourself seeking, timing God, bargaining, rehearsing futures, stop. Give it one sentence. The kingdom is present. Then let that recognition be your prayer. Not another word if no word is given. One breath, one consent, one standing still in what is. If the suggestion comes back, meet it with the same authority. The kingdom is present. Not will be, present. And rest until the compulsion to fix subsides, and the poise of is takes the seat again. Do this, and you will discover something wonderfully unspectacular. Peace becomes the default. Not a peak, a baseline. Decisions rise out of quiet. Kindness stands ready before you think to be kind. Fear looks for its old throne and finds a chair already taken. This is the end of the search, not by running out of roads, but by running out of the belief that God is elsewhere. Do you see that? The kingdom within becomes real the moment you stop trying to make it real. Rest, 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 and let the ever-present kingdom keep you, govern you, and be the unarguable fact of your being.